G'day, we're the Australian Youth Orchestra. We've just got off the bus from the airport. We've flown in from Copenhagen this morning. Pretty excited to be in London. We're playing at the Proms, which is a very big experience for all of us. I'm pretty sure none of us have played at the Proms before. We're so excited to be playing in this fantastic hall that we've all heard so much about.
Well, we're performing some Mahler songs with a wonderful Russian singer, Katerina Gubinova.
The last piece on the program is Shostakovich's 10th Symphony, which is fantastic, very big work.
We're playing a piece by Brett Dean, Amphitheatre, which has got some pretty cool effects in it. We've got some pretty nice stuff to do in the clarinet section, a little bit of extended technique, and there's a really cool effect at the end where the trumpet players actually play into the bells of two tubas. The first two trumpet players get up, walk around behind the low brass section, and will lean right in to the tuba to play this bit of the music, and it's a really cool effect.
Cool indeed. A little taster of tonight's prom, which has a distinctly Russian flavour. As we've just heard, Shostakovich's 10th Symphony is on the bill. We've also the Russian mezzo, Katerina Gubinova here. She'll be singing songs by Mahler from Des Knaben Wunderhorn. Well, Katerina will be joining us during the interval, as well as more of the musicians from the Australian Youth Orchestra. We would love to have your questions, your thoughts, your comments for them. You can email us proms@bbc.co.uk. You can text us 83111. And for those of you who like to tweet, send your tweets to @BBC_Proms. But first this evening, it's a UK premiere, a piece called Amphitheatre by the Australian composer Brett Dean. 30 years ago, he started out as a viola player with this very orchestra. He then joined the Berlin Philharmonic. He continues to perform alongside conducting and composing. Well, I snuck into rehearsals earlier today. Here's what you can expect from the piece. It's a single, slow movement, lasts around 10 minutes or so. It's built around the idea of Roman ruins, a place to gather together and experience stories and spectacles. The piece opens with a huge chord. That is the foundation stone of this musical amphitheatre. Everything is built around that. Well, Brett Dean describes it as being like tiered seating in those ancient arenas. The music radiates outwards, the fanfares increasingly becoming larger than life. And you can get full programme notes. They're available at bbc.co.uk/proms to find out more about all the music in tonight's concert. And here is Sir Mark Elder to conduct the Australian Youth Orchestra, the UK premiere of Brett Dean's piece, Amphitheatre. Mark Elder and the Australian Youth Orchestra with the London premiere of Brett Dean's Amphitheatre. The composer is here tonight. His congratulations there to the leader of the orchestra, Bridget Coleridge, indeed to all the players here this evening. Well, Miranda Krestofnikov is backstage. She's hoping to nab Brett Dean. Have a word with him in a minute.
Brett, hi. Hi, Miranda. Hi. Congratulations, that was great. What's it like hearing your work performed by the orchestra that you actually began your musical career with?
Well, it's extremely exciting, and I mean, for me in the AYO, Sir Mark was one of the first conductors I worked under as well, so this is a very special orchestra in many ways.
Great.
The first time I played at the Proms was here with the AYO. My wife is here with me, and she played in the AYO at the time.
Wow.
So we've
It's a very
known each
special
other
evening.
ever since then.
Great.
So it's been quite a
Great.
wonderful revisiting. Yeah.
And tell me, what gave you the idea about the brass sound, having the trumpets actually play into the bells of the tuba?
Well, the piece obviously also constitutes a lot of memory and fanfares. Fanfares play a big role in the conjuring of the memory of what might have happened in an amphitheatre in its past. So, that was part of it, and to get this sound that's kind of like underwater was a way of really sending that off into a different sphere.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Right, lovely. You better get your seat for the Mahler.
Thank you very much.
Susie, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Miranda. Well, time to introduce my guests for this evening. They are Marshall Marks, the head of music at London South Bank Centre, the composer, Steve Martin. Very warm welcome to you both. Next up this evening, we have Mahler. What do we have in store, Marshall?
Well, it's a set of 6 songs from Das Knaben Wunderhorn, the Magic Wunderhorn, which Mahler composed in the 1890s. And one of the fascinating things is that, some real small studies to put beside a composer who we usually think of as writing these huge gargantuan symphonies. So this is him on a more kind of chamber level.
It's not that chamber, though, is it, Steve? It's not a voice and a piano, which is what we might think of for a German song. This is still a voice and a very large orchestra.
And he composed these songs for voice and orchestra. It wasn't that he wrote them for piano and then later made an orchestration of them, which is often the case. They were written that way. So obviously they were seriously important for him in terms of his thinking for the future, I think, when he wrote the big-scale symphonies. And
like so many of the big-scale symphonies, there's all sorts of music in here, isn't there? There's all kinds of different Mahler voices that we hear.
I think that's right. I mean, the variety of textures he brings into it is extraordinary. But in the end, one of the things that fascinates me is when you look at what these songs are talking about, the kind of morbidity of it. There's death, there's lovers that don't work, there's young children who are dying. I mean, it's quite a kind of difficult area of text.
But those texts have a subtext, I think, from Mahler, which is that everything about his later music, all the symphonies, are sort of about these things. And I think the way to look at them is as they were written early, before the symphonies, really. They became absorbed into the symphonies, thematically some of the music into some of the symphonies, that it's like him going to the supermarket with a shopping trolley.
So Mark Elder and the mezzo-soprano Katerina Gubanova for songs from Mahler's Das Knaben Wunderhorn.
stand auf und ließ ihn ein. Sie heißt ihn auch willkommen sein. Willkommen der Hand nimmt.
6 songs from Mahler's Des Knaben Wunderhorn. The singer, the Russian mezzo Ekaterina Gubanova, with the Australian Youth Orchestra conducted by Mark Elder. Ekaterina has been with this orchestra on part of their world tour. They've just been in Copenhagen. She's here. She'll be travelling to Harrogate and Amsterdam with them. The players adore her. One of them told me earlier she's absolutely helped them to understand all the themes of love and loss in Mahler. They've just loved working with her. I bet they would love to know what you've thought of their performance and some questions from you. So email us, proms@bbc.co.uk is our email address. You can text us on 83111. Well, listening with me, my guests, Marshall Marcus, Steve Martland. Steve, you mentioned just before the music, Mahler's shopping trolley of ideas. What did you mean by that?
Well, when you know the symphonies, which came later, and then you hear these, the themes of these songs, I mean, the literary themes, the ballad nature of them, the folk nature of them all, is what Mahler then uses in the symphonies. I mean, when he says that he's composing the world and he can have any type of music in his symphonies, he does have offstage cowbells and marching bands and all the things that people criticized him for originally. And you hear all of that in these little miniature songs. It is quite interesting that the music sounds like music you already know from a symphony, because he did incorporate some of it later. But I think that it's also the sound world that you become accustomed to. It's just how he was.
Guys, I'm going to stop you because we're going to carry this on in just a second. Miranda is backstage with Katerina Kubanova.
Yes, I'm downstairs in the green room with Ekaterina after that stunning, wonderful performance. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, the songs are based on old folk themes. What do they mean to you?
Well, I guess when it comes to folk songs, they're just so international because they just come from the soul, and all people have the same soul, I guess. So it's really, it really translates really well.
And you've got quite special memories of the last song, I understand.
Yes, absolutely. It's really special because when I was just learning it, I was just singing it in a room and my mom was cooking in the kitchen. She heard just the melodies. I was not playing a CD or anything. And then she just said, she came in and she said, this tune is divine. And then I translated it to her. And we had a little cry.
Oh, wow.
Because it was really...
That's wonderful.
It's really amazing.
So do you remember that when you're singing it on stage now?
Yes, of course. Yeah. It awakes all kinds of feelings. It's really... It's not from this earth, the last song.
Fantastic. And are there any particular challenges within the pieces?
Oh, yes, of course, because it's such a rainbow of different characters. It's like 10 operas stuffed into 20 minutes. It's it's fun and it's challenging at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's it like being Russian, singing in German, and singing here in London at the Albert Hall?
That's everyday life.
Yeah.
It's everyday life for a singer, I guess, because I sing in different countries, in different languages. I just have to really embrace it and try to deliver.
And what's it like being on tour with the Australian Youth Orchestra and Sir Mark Elder?
Oh, it's amazing. It's a very special spirit because they're young and they're so excited, and I can feel it, and they're really putting their best, and it's really
because they obviously
special.
love you. They're very fond of
Bless
you.
them.
You've obviously taught them a lot as well, I hear. So.
Yes, they've been wonderful. They've been a great support. Yeah.
Great, excellent. And I understand you've done some conducting in your time. Is that right? But did you always want to be a singer, or were you tempted to go another way?
No, I only switched on when I was 18. I started with choir conduct. I started as a pianist when I was a little kid, and then it didn't somehow. I liked to be with people, not on my own with the piano. So I switched to choir conducting, and I conducted choirs, and then suddenly this voice came. Great. And I made a really bold, brave step to actually go into that.
Great. We've had an email from a regular viewer called Francis who wants to know what your favourite role is to sing. Difficult.
It's difficult. The thing is that when you do a role, you actually make yourself fall in love with it and really understand the character. But of course, such enriching roles like Amneris, Eboli, they're amazing. Brangeni is also great because it is a secondary character, but you really get to be so compassionate and so caring, and that's a great thing to do.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. It's been great talking to you. Thank you. And Susie, back up to you in the box.
Thanks very much indeed, Miranda. Well, Marshall, we were just talking a moment ago about the depth, the profundity, the absurdity of some of Mahler's music. How well can these guys deliver it? They're young players. That's a lot to cope with.
Yes, and it's interesting these days. There's so many youth orchestras we're used to seeing playing at an incredible level, and so I think you tend to actually, you don't say, well, look, it's a youth orchestra. It's a symphony orchestra doing a concert, and that's, I think, the way that you tend to judge how they deliver this sort of thing. It's fascinating. They're in the middle of a big tour. They've been in China. They've come from Australia. They've been in Denmark, I think. And yet they're like, it seems like they're kind of. There are grown-up orchestras, the way it feels. I don't know whether it strikes you in that way.
Yeah, I also think it's always very interesting, the repertory that youth orchestras play that we were talking about before. Yes. I mean, this first half, for instance, accompanying those Mahler songs, it's very difficult. Youth orchestras, I think, want to play, and it's quite subdued, a lot of the Mahler, and they are accompanying a singer. They did it very well, I think, because the Shostakovich is obviously going to be the sort of thing where they let rip more. Although the first movement isn't really like that. But accompanying these Mahler songs, which are quite long, is obviously a difficult thing to do. But I suppose eventually, if they do get jobs in professional orchestras, they're going to have to do that sort of thing. And youth orchestras are also training orchestras, aren't they?
Yes. Well, we were just talking about how an orchestra of this kind of kids, is that what it's for? Are they being trained to be future grown-up orchestras, or is it a new world they're making?
And one of the other things is just the amazing privilege for them of being exposed to a vast amount of music, vast amount of travelling, quite a fun social life. I mean, it is kind of a geeky thing to be in a youth orchestra until you actually realise that these guys get the most privileged, incredible experiences that most kids would die for.
Yes.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, just think of it, at their sort of age as a teenager, and you're doing intercontinental travel, and in front of audiences in places like this. No, I think it's great. We wouldn't turn it down, would we?
Well, that is the unnatural thing about being a classical musician, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, in this country, most of the people in the National Youth Orchestra, I think, went to one or two of the top specialist music schools. I don't know if we're allowed to name them. And whether that exists in Australia, the same thing, I don't know, but I imagine it's top-level music education in order to reach this standard. And probably the same across the world. So it's not a particularly natural growing up, I think, if you're a classical musician. It's very hothouse and pressurized. And
Well, guys, we're going to talk more about these players in just a second, but first, let's meet some of them. We caught up with some of the players yesterday to find out what it's like being on tour.
So we're about halfway through a 3-week tour. The first half of the tour was in China, so we went to 3 cities in China. We went to Beijing, Shanghai and Tianjin, and that was totally mind-blowing. I mean, it's just absolutely different from anywhere else I've ever been. We were all kind of prepared for these Chinese, a different sort of reaction or concert etiquette in China. And yeah, there was a certain amount of that. I mean, probably people talked a bit more than they would at home during a concert, but especially the one in Beijing, it was totally enthusiastic, and it was really, really amazing to feel that you'd made this connection with people who don't even speak the same language as you. So that was really terrific.
Hi, I'm Emma. I play viola in the Australian Youth Orchestra. I'm 25, so this is my last year that I can be in the orchestra, and so for it to be an international tour was really great and really exciting to go to 5 different countries and just, it's incredible. The highlight of the trip for me has actually been the fact that my sister Charlotte is also in the orchestra, and she plays the viola as well, and we sit 2 seats away from each other, and so it's a lot of banter that goes on during rehearsals, none during concerts of course, but during rehearsals, and it's just been really nice to be able to travel with a family member and feel like I'm at home. I don't have to worry about getting to a hotel room and not knowing who I'm rooming with or anything. So but it's been really great going on this tour, and I know that she's looking forward to performing here at the Albert Hall tomorrow as well. I am so excited. I can't wait to walk in.
I'm Manny. I'm Principal Labor of AYO. I've been really looking forward to coming to London, especially to play the Shostakovich in the hall. Really looking forward to it.
I'm going to be playing a solo in the 3rd movement of the Shostakovich 10th Symphony. It's a French horn solo. It's one recurring theme that comes back throughout the movement. Yeah.
And if the solo goes well, definitely in rehearsals there's lots of foot shuffling and
rubbing on the leg as well.
To just indicate our support.
I do have a little solo as well, right at the beginning of the 4th movement. It's pretty scary. Yeah, hopefully I'll do my best with it.
It's hard to say that an Australian orchestras would have an Australian sound, because I think we're so distant and far removed from the rest of the world that, I don't know, we sort of take influences from all the major centres of music culture around the place, and lots of people have studied, and people that work in the Australian orchestras and the Australian music community have sort of travelled around the world to different places and all brought that back to Australia.
In September, I get to start studying at the Royal College of Music, which is behind me. I'm so excited about it. I came over and did my live auditions in December last year, and I chose to go to the Royal College because it had the best vibe as a student, and all the other students there were so friendly, and the teaching staff's amazing. My new teacher, Andrei Vitovich, it's just this well of knowledge. I had a lesson with him and I came away from it, and there was so many things that I found I could improve in my playing, and he gave me so much inspiration, and it made me realise that even though we come from the other side of the world, I studied in Sydney, and before that I studied in Auckland in New Zealand, my playing is up to scratch for these people, so it's going to be great to go there and show them that someone from little old New Zealand can play.
Great stuff. Well, in just a few moments, performance by the Australian Youth Orchestra of Shostakovich's 10th Symphony. Miranda is backstage with a couple of the players to find out more about the piece.
Yes, thanks, Susie. I'm actually down in the basement where the double basses are, and I'm also with Bridget, the leader, and Alex, the principal horn. Neither of you guys have played in the Albert Hall before. What was it like?
Oh, it's incredible. It's just such an amazing venue. I've seen the outside, but never been inside and seen the interior and the vastness of it. It's incredible to be here.
It can be pretty hard not to get distracted by what's around you, especially when there are people there. I mean, they're so close and standing up, and they seem so interested in what you're doing. So it's great. It's a great atmosphere.
Great, good stuff. Now, Alex, you've got quite a lot to do in the Shostakovich. How do you pace yourself?
Well, it's a matter of just knowing when to give your most and when to sort of sit back and blend into the texture of the orchestra. I've got a bumper also.
Now, tell me about the bumper. They didn't have a great job, do they, really?
Well, a bumper French horn player sort of just is there to assist the horn and plays in some of the louder tutti passages and sort of helps me out when I'm getting a little bit tired and fatigued. And it's quite essential. It's quite a thankless task sometimes, but very essential.
And have you ever been a bumper before?
Many times.
Is it quite hard? Are you just sitting there for hours on end?
In rehearsals, you can be. You can sort of be sitting there sort of for hours at a time, or hours, and not really be playing much in the. But you has to be there, and you have to be switched on and ready to play whenever the first horn calls upon you. So, but it can be slightly tedious at times.
Now you've got a little motif that I'd like people to listen out for. Can you just give us a little blast of that from the third movement? Exposed? Is it quite a tricky one to play?
It's technically it's not difficult, but it is very exposed, so you feel like you're out there on your own, and it comes back many times throughout the movement.
And Bridget, you've got a recurring theme that comes throughout the symphony, this famous DSCH motif referring to Dmitri Shostakovich's name, translated into 4 notes. Can you just play that for us? And that gets passed around the orchestra. It's not just the violins that have that.
No, it's not just the violins. So mostly the string section, and it often comes. It's not just played. It's plucked by the cello bass. So that's something to look out for. But it also comes in very different moods. So I mean that's quite a strident tone that happens at certain high points, climaxes, where it's just beaten out again and again and again, but when the cello bass pluck it, it's actually quite soft and almost menacing. So it's very interesting.
And you're a big fan of Shostakovich. So
well, I'm a big fan of this symphony at any rate.
So what does it mean playing it tonight?
It's fantastic. It's one of those pieces that it's incredibly personal in terms of how it speaks to you, but I mean playing in a venue like this where you've literally got people all around you and everyone's sharing in that, and I mean I was saying to someone before, I mean it's like reading a book, except reading a book you can't have 50 people reading a book at the same time and all experiencing similar or their own personal emotions. So I mean it's sort of an experience unlike any other.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be listening out for those bits and pieces in the second half.
Thank you.
Susie, back up to you.
Thanks very much, guys. Now, we are featuring 3 Shostakovich symphonies. They're all in this season's proms. They are all here this season on BBC 4 for you. The 5th symphony is going to be here. Come along to the Royal Albert Hall if you would like to, the 17th of August, and you can catch that prom on BBC 4 on the 19th of August at 7:30 in the evening. Well, last week we heard Shostakovich's 7th Symphony, the BBC National Orchestra of Wales. We had loads of messages about that, hailing the piece as one of the titans of 20th century music. One feisty listener, though, posted a message saying Shostakovich had written a wretched travesty of a symphony. Controversial stuff there. Last night, the charismatic Andris Nelsons wowed us. He was conducting the CBSO, a magical interpretation of Dvorak's 9th Symphony. Twitter was a-buzzing with praise for his infectious energy, his dance-like style of conducting. Various tweets and emails from you lot all coming in. We've got Jeff Brady, who is apparently an alumnus of this orchestra. How wonderful, he says, to see... I'm not going to do this in an Australian accent, by the way. How wonderful to see the Australian Youth Orchestra in such good shape, playing fine music. Keep it up, guys. So there you go, message of support from Jeff Brady. Do keep your thoughts coming in on the performance section of the Radio 3 message boards, or you can send them to proms@bbc.co.uk. You can text us on the usual number 83111 and you can tweet at BBC Proms. But back to tonight's prom, and I met up with conductor Mark Elder after rehearsals this morning. So Mark, you've just been touring around China, around Europe, and I think you just got back to the UK yesterday. What's it like to be back?
Well, it's exciting with this experience behind us. 2 weeks of rehearsals in Sydney, incredible audiences in China, some of them very unexpected, some of them huge, like football crowds. And to be back in Europe, of course, is very exciting for this young orchestra. Most of them have never been here in their lives.
How's the jet lag going, conducting over various time zones?
Well, I suffer from jet lag pretty badly, so I shall have a good sleep tonight and a good sleep this afternoon.
So how did you first come to work with this orchestra?
Well, it was a very long time ago that I first met this orchestra. In fact, my career as a conductor started in the early 70s in Australia, and after I'd been there for a few years, I came back to Europe and continued to go out to Australia to work with the different orchestras. And it was, I think, about 25 years ago that the youth orchestra asked me whether or not I'd come and meet them and work with them at the Adelaide Festival. And we did 2 weeks, I remember. The first week was an American program. Very extraordinary music, very difficult for them, unknown. And then the next week, it was Berlioz's Damnation of Faust. And the composer of tonight's first item was playing the principal viola at
Brett
that time.
Dean was in the orchestra.
Brett Dean was in the orchestra. One earring, lots of hair. And he was a great musician then, and he certainly is now.
Well, I was watching really closely in rehearsals. There's obviously a fantastic warmth and chemistry between you and these players. What do you get from working with them?
Well, it reminds me why we all became musicians in the first place. Here are these 80 or so young players having spent all their teens practicing their instruments, and they're now masters of them. And they're ready for the profession. Most of them I'd give a job in the Halley to the drop of a hat. I mean, they're in really great shape.
You don't make any allowances for the fact that they're kids, do you? You're very tough on them.
Yeah, because I think that that's what they're hoping I'll do, that I will take them to another level. Because, of course, it's one thing to play a string quartet, it's one thing to practice your instrument in your bedroom quietly, but to be a symphony orchestra, that takes time and discipline and experience.
Now, I understand that none of these players has ever been to the Royal Albert Hall. What can they expect from their very first time here?
Well, it's a very special atmosphere here, isn't it? And they've heard about it, and we've warned them, but many of them have heard from other sources what an extraordinary event a concert here is. And I think that there's a great excitement and a great sense of this being the most important concert of the tour. And I think they're fascinated to see how this huge space is going to come alive tonight with the people here, and how they've got to be themselves and not hide under nerves, and just express themselves and show everybody why they want to be musicians. Because, you know, about 95% of the orchestra have already decided that they really will be professional musicians.
Tonight's conductor, Mark Elder.
To play it extremely well. You've got the scherzo, which is, academics tell us, is the portrait of Stalin. That's only 4 minutes long, and it's pretty spectacular. And of course, the final movement is a huge whirlwind as well, especially at the end. I don't know, I mean, the horns, everybody seems to have something very good to play in this piece, don't they?
Yeah, and I think there's an immediacy about the emotion of it, and it's interesting. I mean, you were talking about the Stalin, so-called connection, but in the end, we were both agreeing it's about the sound and the way he's written it, rather than any explanation of geography of it.
Yes.
I mean, one of the perennial problems with talking about Shostakovich's music is the discussion at the political level. How repressed was he by the Stalinist regime? How ironic was he able to be? How did it influence his music? And then there's the other camp that says, can we just put all that to one side and have a look at the notes, please? And that's only sort of rearing its head more confidently quite recently, I think.
Well, we're certainly members of that party here. No, I mean, I just think you can give any explanation, and it's fascinating. You know, I could read it for years, all this stuff, but in the end, it's just, it gets your body when you're listening. And I think that type of visceral effect of the symphony, again, which is what makes it a youth orchestra piece, I would say.
Well, the other thing that they don't talk about now is really, when they're talking about Shostakovich, is that he was a communist and an atheist. But of course, that's far too uncomfortable. So they talk about how he was repressed, or oppressed rather, and had messages in the music for the audience and for the world at large, which I think is ridiculous, actually. I mean, he was a product of that society, and he just happened to be a brilliant composer. And in this piece, there is a message, but it's only about recently known that, in fact, it was his infatuation with a much younger woman, a student, where his own name in notes, 4 notes is used, and her name is on the, in the third movement.
And another one of the difficulties of talking about this, you've said the Stalin movement, that's this 4-minute blast, as you've said, of kind of real fury and rage and temper. Shostakovich has these famously unreliable memoirs written by Solomon Volkov after his death. Nobody has any idea really what the composer was thinking and what he meant by this music.
That's right, and Solomon Volkov's writing, it's funny, it's almost if when you read it, you can't put it aside. It's there and it's done, and of course for many years it was seen as the truth, and now everybody says, well, maybe not. You know, it's a lot of problems.
But what Shostakovich did actually say about the symphony was that this short scherzo, supposedly the Stalin movement, was probably too short. He thought it was imbalanced. And he brings it back at the very end of the final movement, of course. And as a composer, that was his genius. He realised he could reintroduce it at the end of the symphony, and of course it comes back spectacularly from a musical point of view. And it's nothing to do with the fact that a warning of Stalin coming again.
Yes, but I mean, for whatever reason, the other thing that's interesting is, what was it, 8 years since he'd written his 9th symphony?
Yes, 8 or 9, a very long gap for him.
15 symphonies, suddenly there is a huge gap. And that's something which, it's not a matter of explanation, it's a fact, and it's actually a very powerful thing. End of the Second World War, and it's almost to the mid-50s before he comes out with this next piece.
And in some ways you could say that's the reason for this explosive force, that this guy hadn't written a symphony for whatever reason for several years, where he'd been churning them out.
Well, of course, there was this Donov, was it 1948, when he was denounced in the famous Donov proclamation. And I think that then he just had to toe the line and sort of wrote film music.
Yes, and of course that also happened to him in the 30s, again when he was in the middle, and the 4th Symphony, which doesn't get performed for years later. So, I mean, it was a stormy life, there's no doubt about it.
Without doubt, it was very difficult. But I think that basically he was just a simple composer who just wrote music.
So this is the composer who wants to be left alone to write music, would you say?
In a sense, well, unfortunately, because of the politics, I think people have written so much into him.
Yes.
And academics at universities here and around the world just perpetuate what is often a load of rubbish.
Thanks very much to both of you. Well, here is Sir Mark Elder joining the Australian Youth Orchestra for a performance of Shostakovich's 10th Symphony.
What a showcase for these young players. Shostakovich's 10th Symphony, the Australian Youth Orchestra conducted by Sir Mark Elder. For these players tonight, all aged between 16 and 25, it is the first time for each and every one of them to perform here at the Royal Albert Hall. Mark Elder was incredibly tender and gentle with them in rehearsals, told them just to relax, not to be nervous of the acoustic, the size of the place, just to enjoy themselves. Some great soloists in this orchestra. As we heard Sir Mark say earlier, he'd hire at least 95% of them to play in the Halle. There is Alexander Love, the horn player who we met earlier, along with all the brass section. Well, the orchestra's appearance here tonight, supported by Accenture, Downer and the Australian government. Mark Elder's such a huge fan of the music scene in Australia, has such a passion for the country. He moved there in his 20s to work at Sydney Opera House with Sir Edward Downes. For him, paradise, he said, not least because of the wonderful Australian wines. Percy Granger's Irish tune from County Derry, the Australian Youth Orchestra, conducted by Mark Elder. And that is the end of tonight's prom. I do hope you will be back with us tomorrow for a little night music, our first ever all Sondheim prom. Don't miss it either on Radio 3 or on BBC 2. But for now, from all of us at the Royal Albert Hall, it's good night.